Hello, beautiful soul. I hope that you are doing well today. I am excited to bring you another installment of Ask the Author for the book, The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People. And my guest on this episode is Cynthia J Harrison from Australia. Her story is going to really shake some things up because she is not only an energy medicine practitioner dealing with biofield and all this amazing stuff now, but she has really been tuned in to intuition and how energy moves through us and can sometimes get trapped in us since she was a very young woman. And what's really incredible about Cynthia's story is that she's sharing something very personal, and it's about her daughter. And the trauma that she endured is not something I would wish on anyone in the world. But the strength and the resilience that she has found to not only come through that, but to 26 years later, after the birth of this daughter, she had to tune into that again. So I'm not going to give it away. We're going to talk about it in this interview. You're going to read about it in the book. But I think you're going to be really inspired because each of these resilience traits are within each of us. Now, sometimes they might seem like little weak muscles that have never been used, but what Cynthia is teaching us is that there are ways that we can stimulate and grow and become more resilient. So I think you're going to enjoy this interview. I look forward to hearing your feedback. Cynthia Harrison, it is so wonderful to connect with you again. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us in this book, The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be part of the book. I'm really excited. I can't wait for it to come out for other people to read all the wonderful stories and insights that are in there.
Yes, well, it is a book chock full of insights, and your story kind of weaves in a little bit of magic along with just tuning into our own abilities to heal and to be resilient and to follow our intuition and trust. So, I mean, you have such a varied background, but it sounds like from a very young age, you've had to really tune in and learn about trust for yourself. Is that true?
Yeah, and in a strange way, I actually tuned out, and that's what part of my story is about. Being able to be so sensitive and having really access to my inner guidance system, but it being so overwhelming, and with so much happening in my life that I found myself numbing out. And
was it because you could hear things or see things, or was it just the feeling like you were picking up on so much?
Yeah, when I was younger, I was more of a what I call now kinesthetic. So there's 4 main sensory stress styles, and my first one is kinesthetic. My second one is tonal. So that's a little bit different to the learning styles. Most people might know the learning styles because these are about the energetics. So rather than, the teaching modes, so to speak. So a kinesthetic has a felt sense. So if you have a headache and I'm sitting near you, I'll feel your headache. So it's some people might call it an empath, but empaths aren't necessarily kinesthetic. So there's other energetics that are involved, and I suppose that is how I wove my way through the world to understand what this vehicle is and how it works today, so I can help other people, highly sensitive people, sensitives, empaths, those that are, having symptoms, and really about listening. The core really is about listening, not only to the physiology, and the energetics, but that, still small voice, we might say. So there's many layers to, I suppose, that journey. But, you know, to start with, as a young one, I had no idea what all of that was.
Yeah.
And so it was just so overwhelming to my body that I would self-medicate, basically, which I think a lot of people do even as adults, because they don't want to feel. And so as a, you know, going on and being a social worker and a therapist and whatnot, understanding that at another level of when people are coming off or out of addictions and whatnot, they start to feel, and they're really struggling with their felt sense, you know, their physicality again. And there's a whole, you know, another path or way of knowing about that. So yeah, understanding these multiple levels of, you know, how we are in the world, and, you know, mind, body, spirit, at all of those levels.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, what's interesting is that you share in the book the experience of having your daughter, which was the whole thing surrounding the pregnancy, and where I'll let you tell it. That was a pretty intense trauma for such a young woman, and yet you say that you really feel like trauma is a portal for our evolution. So before we get to the positive, this is a portal for evolution, like, you got to talk us through how to build up that resilience from what happened to you. So tell us about what happened when you were pregnant with your daughter.
Oh, so it's a long story, of course, you know, but ultimately, when I reflected back on it, and I also want to put in, we just put a little sidebar there, that the reason why I wanted to tell the story, but I'll come to that in a moment. Understanding at the time, it was really just survival and getting through, and not really having any choice or say in my life at all. And, you know, even though I chose to carry on with the pregnancy, I mean, that was the voice I listened to. So, and still the voice, it's not necessarily a voice as such. It's difficult to say what it is. It's not like somebody is speaking to me. It's more like I suppose you could say, a telepathic sort of sense, or a knowing.
Yeah, an inner knowing.
Say it's a knowing. It's an inner knowing, but it's really forceful and it's guiding. And you just have there was no hesitation that I wouldn't go forward.
Remind us, how old were you at that point?
I was 15.
Yeah. So that's incredible, though, because for being such a young girl, pregnant, where your family is telling you one thing, and to have that inner knowing at such a young age that says, no, I'm going to defy everyone and move forward.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, because I had that little voice, and it was interesting because, you know, I knew that if I spoke to anybody else, adults, so to speak, that there would be pressure to go another path. So I and some of my friends basically went through that journey together until about 7.5 months. And then, you know, the adults knew. So it was like, you know, this working out how to do and be healthy, strong, how to start to get back into, all right, if I'm choosing to listen and take responsibility for this life, I have to take responsibility for my life. And that's what I wasn't doing, because there was so much overwhelm in my what I was feeling of the world. It was like the pain and suffering of the world and everyone in it, so to speak.
Yeah.
So the shutdown happened probably around, I mean, this is a whole nother story. It could be in another book, because I was in a coma when I was 10, 11. And when I came back online, the world, that's where I really started to see the world and feel more. And a lot of people have those experiences, like near-death experiences and whatnot. And I feel like that exacerbated what I experienced, you know, physically as a human being. I didn't so much, you know, looking back, I suppose I did see and feel and sense and know things, but it was more because it was survival. It was really just, you know, focus, what do I have to do to get through what I'm experiencing right this moment. So yeah, that was the choice of really the knowing coming in, this is what needed to happen. My free will, my 1% free will of yes or no, and I chose yes. Yeah. Because it came in so strong. Okay. And yes, there was fear and having to be almost militant, really. That's not a word I use very often, but really to get through and not be impacted by the adults, which really were the enemy.
Yeah, yeah.
At that time, the adults were the enemy, because once they knew, they took charge and I was put in a home because it was too late and we knew I needed to get to a certain stage, and then they've got no way of terminating without my, permission and whatnot. So I still got shipped off to a home and lost contact with everybody, family, friends, school, everything, and that was a whole nother journey. Yeah. They treated me well. I was looked after by nuns, but it was an adoption place, and I didn't know that at the time. It was really like secret service, and we hear about all these young women whose babies were taken, even up to the 80s. So that was one of the places that I was in, and I was lucky enough to still get through. But the story is about a little bit about the fight and the challenges that I was up against, and just the scrutiny from the adults. Yeah. Right up into my 20s, really. Just being a young mum. Yeah. And so looking back, it really taught me different ways of getting around the systems, really. Mm-hmm. I can navigate a system like nothing else. So when I was a social worker and assisting, homeless people and the most oppressed people, I really understood the systems and how we could get around. It's not illegally, but understanding how to survive in the systems, because they can really be tricky to jump certain hoops. Just to have housing, for instance. Yeah. No one would give me housing. It's things like that. So really simple things that we take for granted. And even, wanting to feed my child, not being able to because they were trying to adopt her out without my consent. So, all of those things, that there's something that just comes up inside, that it wasn't I wasn't aggressive, but it was a strength of, for whatever reason, this child needed to stay with me. Right. And
so we won't give away. We'll let the audience read the story, because there's a lot there to what you had to do to get out of that home with your daughter with you. But then you jump forward in the chapter that you wrote when your child's health was at risk, and you guys were separated by thousands of miles, and yet once again there was a sense of tuning into a knowing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I think it was 26 years later. it was a fight for her life again. And so the journey or the story is about those, fights for life and the strength and courage that was needed for both of us to survive both of those situations and come out, power filled, women empowered and able to really speak our truth and be who we are rather than what society expects of us. So I don't want to give too much away because we want people to read the story, but it was another sort of life-threatening incident where, at the beginning, it was fighting just for her pure life, to be born. And then for her life, whether with me or somebody else, another family or adoption or whatnot. And then later on about, injuries that were life-threatening and how we had to move every day, really not knowing whether there would be, something with the lungs or the brain damage or, different organs impacted and whatnot. So that was where I really had come into learning about the voice, being directed, what my gifts to the world are, what my medicine is. And the things that I share are always from direct experience. So some of the things that I did to get through, the everyday not knowing if my child was going to live or if she did live, whether she would be, brain damaged or even, lung problems, whether she could walk, talk, those sorts of things. And so every day I worked on different systems. And every day the nurses and the doctors would tell me what they're worried about. And then I would work on those systems. So I'd go to the park, I'd spend most of the time at the hospital and in ICU. And then I would go to the park and I would do my own work, which, I talk about in the book, about how I can place with intent my feelings into or through using this, what we call the sacred heart. And it's almost like giving up to something more than yourself. So again, it links to that voice, but it's where I learned how to work more effectively. It wasn't just a voice, it was like a co-creative experience.
Wow. So when you say each day that there was a challenge in your daughter's health, the nurses would sort of tell you what the focus point is, like, okay, we're worried about her lungs now. And you would leave and do your sacred heart practice to work on yourself and then tuning into her energy. Yeah? Is that what you mean?
Well, what I would do is I would do her energy. So even on the plane flight over, I knew what organs were they were most worried about. So on the plane over there, it's a 5-hour flight or something. So it took me about 7 hours or so to get there. So I didn't know whether she would make it or not in that time. So I was doing my own, work to stay focused and attend to what needed to be attended to so I could, go off. And I didn't know when I would be back. And in fact, it was many months before I went back. So I was, I had a profession and, how do you just walk out of your profession and all your clients and all of that? So that's, part of having to negotiate that too, responsibility, and working her meridians and her higher energy systems in particular ways to strengthen or move the flow through or, whatever was going on. So when I got there, they were first worried about the lungs. And when I got there, she was much more online. But then it started to go, okay, the other organs were impacted. So then I would do the energy work while I'm with her. And then when I'm not with her, I would be doing my work, because I had to leave it to make sure that my cup was overflowing, not just full.
Yeah.
I say now that my cup needs to be overflowing into the saucer, and what's in the saucer you can have.
Yeah. And that's so
Because
critical, because most of us as caregivers, and also the empaths and all of us sensitive people who want to like give, and we're so compassionate, but it's sometimes it requires many people to burn out before they get to where you recognize that you can only give from the overflow, not from my cup, but from the overflow.
Exactly. And so, everybody knows that. Well, a lot of people know that saying about, my cup's half empty or whatever. And I say, no, it needs to be overflowing. It's the abundance. And that's not out of
It's
reach,
not selfish. Yeah.
You write about self-love. This is about self-love. This is about loving. And, I talk about kindness enough, because often people can't get to love because of their own trauma and whatnot. It's difficult for people to love themselves. So how do you just be kind? Start with kindness, because we can't give to anybody else without that. And I know that you know that well, but, reinforcing that, and how do we use metaphor or story or re-story, for our wisdom, so that we can share and assist people to get that in a way that they can bring it into their everyday life, because that's what I found people struggle with. There's all this work out there and it's wonderful, but how do we bring it into our everyday life and actually put it into action?
So how would you recommend that? Because, not only in your personal life have you been able to establish resilience, but now you're doing so much amazing work between bridging like energy, medicine, stuff, and your sort of sacred healing practices as a medicine woman and as a coach and a therapist. Like, you have so many different pieces of this healing pie. So what would be kind of like the key things that you would suggest to someone who does need to learn how to top up their energy and tune into that resilience, even though things around them may be crumbling or falling apart?
There's numerous things. So what came to mind when you were speaking, so I'm going to say that one, but if we have time, I'll tell you another. But my core practice is light sound, which gives you presence. And that's listening. Listening with the ear of the heart. Okay? And it's not for voices, it's for whatever comes in. And when we practice listening, we eventually see the light that goes with what we hear. And it's not coming through our ears. I actually was speaking to a lady who's completely deaf, and she hears these sounds. I call them the sounds of the universe, or the music of the spheres, the holy naam, the ek. There's numerous names from all different traditions. But this sound is literally, it's like if God or the beloved were to speak. This is the sound. This is the sound of the Big Bang roaring. It's the sound of all there is, okay? And all of us have it within, but we're so busy that we're not tuning in. And so a practice that I share is that just listening, and you can do it 30 seconds numerous times a day. When you go to the fridge, stop, listen, come to the heart, listen, right? Then get whatever you want out of the fridge, turn the kettle on. The kettle's a good one because I'm a tea drinker. So I do a lot of practice when I'm turning the kettle on. And the thing is that when you practice that regularly, which gives you the presence, the direct connection, but it also, I suppose, it assists you to see more. So your senses and you're coming back to the core. It's a really practical, so it's a practical mystic tool. And, you know, so that's something that you could do anytime, you know, stopping at the traffic lights. Listen, you don't need to close your eyes, you know, if you're practicing listening. As you go along, you might put ear plugs in and just, you know, see that it's actually not coming from the ears. It's coming from within. So there's many layers and many different sounds, and that's what, as a medicine woman, I do teach now and then the different sounds and what levels they're coming from, and the geometries. Eventually the geometries come with the sound. Relates to the brain wave, the hertz of the brain, you know, alpha, beta, gamma, theta, delta, you know, it all links in. So it's really what states of consciousness you're at. So you can sit for hours and meditate, but those of you that really, you know, don't want to, it's a choice. You can, there's many practices that are, you know, you could do at any point of time through your day, you know, just stopping and listening, because by listening, you're stilling that mind to be able to hear that, what we call the still small voice, which isn't somebody speaking to you. It is these sounds. But these sounds are like, I know this might sound a bit cosmic, but it is, it's literally, the science of it is the ringing of the energetics or the charge of the heart, which is, I call it the black hole, but there's a point within the heart, you know, and then if you go into the sacred heart, that's another energy again. So probably going a little bit off track. But the other thing that is really important that I've spent the last 3 years really teaching a lot about is earthing. And if we're not earthed, electrically earthed, right, our physical body is an electrical system. And we talk about grounding a lot. I rarely talk about grounding now because I really want to make the difference of what I'm talking about is how we conduct energy and electrically earth into Mother Earth so that we can use her field to heal us. Because when we're not earthed or electrically earthed, it's like your refrigerator or any electrical appliance needs to be earthed, and so does the physical body.
So in grounding, like people have previously talked about it as, you know, you take off your shoes and actually, you know, go out in the grass or in the sand and like touch Mother Earth.
Yeah, that's not working anymore. What I've seen over the last 3 years, like I said, with the shift in the poles of the Earth, and I've mentioned to you before, you know, I've talked to my dad. He's a magnetics specialist from, you know, the 60s and 70s, and has gone all around the world teaching about these sorts of things. And, you know, when I see things in the field, I'll ask him and say, you know, this is what I'm seeing in the human system now, and how I'm working with these, you know, the positive, negative, neutral charge of the body, was how he was working, you know, back in, you know, before I was born, with vessels, submarines, big ships and aeroplanes and whatnot, because of how they navigate and how they need to be earthed, or they call it gouged or degouged, demagnetized. So there's other things that are going on with our systems that, when we're not connected well, create inflammation, aches and pains. You know, inflammation, you would know, it creates a lot of illness.
Yeah.
So
how do you recommend then that we get rid of those charges that are in our body?
Well, there's particular, I would say 3 particular points on the feet. So we've got the kidney meridian, the kidney 1 on the ball of the foot. That's our life force energy. It pulls in and pushes out. Now, when the energies are distressed, when our nervous system is, you know, on alert, then we get irregularities in our energy systems. And an irregularity is, there's 3 different types, but the one that, you know, I'm seeing over and over is a frozen point. And if you've got frozen points on that K1 on the bottom of the foot, you can walk on grass or on the ocean till the cows come home. I'm telling you, it's not doing anything anymore. Like, it's, when I say it's not doing anything, if you correct those points, which is really simple, then go and walk on the earth, or, you know, spend time at the ocean, or go and put you back on a tree with your feet. You know, all of these different things that we could do, or even just imagining, you know, linking in. But while we have irregularities, every energy system that has an irregularity needs to be realigned or corrected. Otherwise, the other energy medicine doesn't work. And I've worked with so many other practitioners, Reiki masters and whatnot, and we've done research on this. And just because I was seeing this for years, and I'm saying to my friends who are Reiki masters and whatnot, do you want to test this, so that it's not to say that your work isn't working, but let's see if we can make it work more effectively, because, you know, any irregularities in those systems, you might get a hold for, you know, a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, so the practitioner's checking things, yep, it's all clear, person walks out the door and it's all back.
So how could someone do it on their own, or what sort of practitioner do we need to look for?
Well, you don't need to. I share this every Monday. I have you know, free Facebook Lives where I teach these sorts of things free. And basically, so I could show you really quickly the kidney one. So just imagine that's the foot, and you've got the kidney 1 point just under the ball of the foot. And it doesn't really matter. You don't need to know where the points are exactly, but using your hands as a magnet. Okay, so we're talking about magnetism here, electrical system and a magnetic system. And using your hand as a magnet, so that's your foot. You're just flipping your hand north, south, or actually south, north, south, north. It doesn't really matter. You can go, it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you're getting the front and the back. And usually 3 or 4 times doing that on each foot will clear that, right? Usually. If it's chronic, it might take a little bit longer, but I've been doing this for hundreds of people over years at, you know, in my clinic practice, online, you know, when I'm going to festivals and whatnot, and I'm just seeing hundreds of people. And this is how I see the patterns of behavior, you see, because I'm seeing so many people, and I recognize I'm really good at seeing patterns. So I see, why are these people having all of these different treatments? And then we check their earthing, and it's out. It's not working. So that's why. And the other two, just quickly to let you know, is the second toe is the stomach meridian, and the baby toe is the bladder, right? So the ends of the stomach and the ends of the bladder. And those 2 toes on both feet are our conducting rods, and they are like, you know, the conductors that go down into the ground. So if one's out, the others can sort of assist and get rid of what I call the soot that our electrical system is. You know, when you burn something, you've got the remnants, or the rubbish, so to speak. So our body has that too, energetically. And like, these are the points where, you know, that is distributed back into the earth, and the earth uses that. So we are the bridge between heaven and earth. We are pulling energy up. It's going through all our systems and doing what it needs to do, and then it's going to the heavens, or the positive energy, and then it's coming back through us and going back into the earth. And if you're not earthed electrically in those ways and with the magnetics, you can't function that well, which means you start to get restrictions in flow and excess energy. Excess energy is pain, generally, you know. So, but what I'm seeing with the earthing is swelling in the feet, pains in the ankles, the knees, the hips, being really sort of woozy or dizzy, or, you know, headaches, all of these sort of symptoms, sensitivities. Because if you're not earth, your aura can't be strong and can't infiltrate, can't filtrate. So most sensitives, I spoke to a lady this morning from Ireland, and she said, I've seen so many workers, and it hurts me just for them to move energy. Of course it does, because she has got, it's like her skin's been taken off.
Yeah.
It's like her skin's been taken off. As soon as she said that, I knew. I don't even need to check it. It's like, so we're having a call on Saturday just to very gently speak to her and let her know that, you know, it's okay, and we're not going to rush anything, and let's just look at this, because, you know, if her system is that sensitive, then to build that aura or that biofield, we need to be earthed in those ways that I just mentioned. So,
well,
we went off on a whole.
we need to have just a whole another hour to explore the wisdom that is in you, and actually we have another book that you were contributing to that will come out in 2020. So, wow. Well, Cynthia, this has been really insightful, and I think as a starting point, when people read this extensive background that you had with the story about your daughter, it will make so much sense how you put all these pieces together over your life and now in your professional world. So people can get a hold of the book, The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People, to read your story. They can also check in with you online, rhombushealingarts.com and Rhombus Healing Arts on Facebook, so that you can attend one of those Monday free sessions and start getting this insight.
And that's part of my service. Yeah, it's part of my service to just start sharing, and people can ask questions like you know, what we just mentioned, and I'll show you in real time, live, you know, a snippet or a tool of what you can do. That's my work in the world now, because this needs to be shared.
Yeah.
So that we can all have some tools and techniques in our toolbox to get us through these practical, everyday challenges, I suppose. When we're challenged, we have a little tool to just go, okay, I'll try this.
I love it. Thank you, my friend. So many resilience insights. I love it. So there you have it. You can read Cynthia's story in the book, grab a copy, and be sure to check her out online. I am so grateful, Cynthia, that we have this connection that has been bubbling and brewing for the last couple of years. Really grateful that you're sharing with the world all of this knowledge that you have. So from down under in Australia, we're going to filter it out as far as I possibly can to do my part. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. I love working with you. It's a joy. It really is.
Thank you. So there you have it, my friends. Until we meet again, please do remember that you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love.